There was a time during the Cold War when the fate of entire nations could be decided not in days, not in hours, but in the time it took a single aircraft to reach its target. No warning, no second chance, just a radar contact approaching from thousands of miles away. Because in that era, one machine carried a level of power that could reshape the world. Not hidden, not silent, but always ready, always in motion. This is the story of the bomber that could end the world in hours. The aircraft that became a symbol of American reach, endurance, and strategic power. This is the story of the B-52 Stratofortress. At the height of the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union faced a reality unlike anything before. Both possessed nuclear weapons. Both had the ability to strike across continents. And both understood that a full-scale conflict would not be limited to battlefields. It would affect cities, populations, entire regions. The scale of destruction had changed, but having nuclear weapons was enough. The question was how to deliver them, and how to ensure that delivery could not be stopped. In the early years, long-range bombers became the primary solution. Aircraft capable of carrying nuclear payloads across vast distances. Flexible, adaptable, capable of being recalled if necessary. Unlike missiles, which once launched could not be stopped, bombers offered control. But they also carried risk. They could be detected, tracked, intercepted by enemy fighters or air defenses. And as Soviet radar systems improved, that risk increased. The United States needed a bomber that could overcome those challenges. One that could fly farther, carry more, operate longer, and survive in an environment that was becoming more dangerous with every passing year. The answer was not incremental. It was a leap. The B-52 was designed for range, for endurance, for the ability to remain in the air for extended periods, long enough to reach any target, anywhere in the world. Its size reflected its mission. Large wings, multiple engines, a structure built not for speed alone, but for sustained performance. Because this aircraft wasn't designed for short missions. It was designed to cross oceans, to remain airborne for hours, even days with aerial refueling, to ensure that distance was no longer a barrier. Inside the United States, the introduction of B-52 changed how strategic power was understood, because now, response wasn't limited by geography. A bomber could be launched from one continent and reach another, carrying a payload capable of unprecedented destruction. But the real power of the B-52 wasn't just in what it carried, it was in how it was used. Because, unlike missiles, bombers could be placed on alert, launched as a precaution, held in the air while decisions were made. That flexibility created options. And in the Cold War, options mattered, because decisions had to be made under pressure, with limited information, and the ability to delay a final action, even by minutes, could change everything. The B-52 became part of that system, a visible presence, a constant reminder, because at any moment, these aircraft could be airborne, moving toward their targets. And if you're interested in Cold War stories like this, where strategy and technology combine to shape global power, consider subscribing, because what the B-52 would go on to do wasn't just about capability, it was about control. Because once these bombers took to the skies, they didn't just carry weapons, they carried decisions. Decisions that could define the outcome of the Cold War itself. Once the B-52 entered service, it didn't just expand capability, it transformed how deterrence was maintained. Because for the first time, the United States could keep nuclear force not just ready, but active in the air. Strategic Air Command began operating the B-52 in a way no aircraft had been used before. Constant readiness, crews on alert, aircraft prepared to launch at a moment's notice, and in some cases, already airborne, flying continuous patrols, orbiting along predetermined routes, close enough to reach their targets quickly, but far enough to remain outside immediate threat zones. This was something new, a system where response wasn't waiting on the ground. It was already in motion. If an attack occurred, these bombers would not need to prepare. They would already be positioned, already fueled, already moving. That readiness created a powerful signal, because it showed that the United States didn't rely on reaction alone. It relied on presence. At any given time, multiple B-52s were in the sky, carrying their payloads, maintained through aerial refueling, supported by tanker aircraft that extended their range even further. The concept was simple. Endurance meant reach, and reach meant influence. The B-52 could operate for hours without landing, cross oceans without stopping, remain on station as long as necessary. And that endurance changed the equation, because now distance offered less protection. Targets that were once considered out of range were no longer safe. At the same time, the aircraft itself had to survive in an increasingly complex threat environment. Soviet air defenses were advancing: surface-to-air missiles, improved radar systems, interceptor aircraft designed specifically to engage high-altitude bombers. The skies were becoming more dangerous, and the B-52 had to adapt. Early strategies relied on altitude, flying high above most offenses. But as missile technology improved, that approach became less reliable, so tactics evolved. Low-level penetration, flying close to the terrain, using the curvature of the Earth to reduce detection. Long missions that required precision navigation and constant awareness. Inside the cockpit, crews managed not just the aircraft, but the mission as a whole: navigation, fuel management, communication, defensive systems. Each element required coordination because the margin for error was small and the consequences enormous. Training became intense, repeated, refined. Crews prepared for scenarios where communication might be limited, where decisions would have to be made independently, where the mission would continue, even under uncertain conditions. Because once a B-52 was airborne with its payload, it wasn't just an aircraft. It was a strategic asset in motion. Every decision made inside that cockpit carried weight, and every crew understood that responsibility. At the same time, the presence of these bombers influenced the thinking on the other side. Soviet planners had to account for them, track them, prepare for the possibility that at any moment they could move from deterrence to action, because unlike missiles, which followed fixed trajectories, bombers were flexible. They could change course, alter targets, be recalled, or continue forward. That uncertainty made them difficult to counter, and that difficulty added pressure, because in the Cold War, uncertainty could shape decisions as much as capability. If you're interested in Cold War stories like this, where the balance of power was maintained not just by weapons, but by how they were used, consider subscribing, because what the B-52 represented wasn't just strength, it was constant presence. But even with that presence, even with that readiness, the system faced a reality that couldn't be avoided, because keeping nuclear bombers in the air meant accepting risk, not just from the enemy, but from the mission itself. And that risk would eventually reveal just how fragile the balance really was. But the greatest tension surrounding the B-52 didn't come from combat. It came from how close the system itself could come to failure, because maintaining bombers in the air, carrying nuclear weapons, created a new kind of risk, one that wasn't always visible, one that didn't come from an enemy radar screen, but from a reality of operating complex machines under constant pressure for extended periods of time. There were moments during the Cold War when that risk became real. Aircraft flying long missions, refueling midair, operating in all-weather conditions. At all hours, the margin for error was small, and the consequences could be catastrophic. In one such moment, a B-52 broke apart in the sky during a routine operation, high above American soil, its payload still on board, debris scattered across the ground below, and suddenly, the danger that had always been directed outward was present at home. Emergency response teams moved quickly, securing the area, recovering components, ensuring that the situation remained contained. Because even in an accident, the stakes remained high. These weren't conventional weapons. They were nuclear, and the possibility of unintended consequences had to be managed immediately. The incident revealed something critical, that the system designed to prevent war also carried its own risks, not from intention, but from operation. At the same time, these events did not stop the mission, because a strategic need remained. The requirement for constant readiness, for visible capability, for a force that could respond at any moment. But they did lead to changes. Procedures were reviewed, safety measures strengthened, operational patterns adjusted, because maintaining deterrence wasn't just about power, it was about control. And control required constant refinement. Still, the most intense moments involving the B-52 came not from accidents, but from global crises, times when tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union reached their peak, moments when bombers were placed on the highest levels of alert, prepared to launch, prepared to execute missions that could not be reversed. During these periods, crews waited in readiness, aircraft fueled, systems checked, orders prepared, everything in place, because if the signal came, there would be no delay and no second chance. In those moments, the B-52 represented something more than capability. It represented the final step, the point at which deterrence would end and action would begin. And yet, time after time, that step was never taken. Because even as tensions rose, control held, decisions were measured, responses were calculated, and the aircraft remained where they were meant to be, ready but unused. That balance between readiness and restraint defined the role of the B-52, because its power wasn't just in what it could do, it was in what it didn't have to do. The presence of the aircraft, the knowledge that they could be launched, that they could reach their targets, that they carried a level of destruction that could not be ignored. That knowledge influenced decisions on both sides. It slowed escalation, introduced caution, forced consideration, because once those bombers crossed a certain point, there would be no turning back. And if you're interested in Cold War stories like this, where the most critical moments happened in silence before any action was taken, consider subscribing, because what the B-52 revealed wasn't just the power of a weapon, it was the weight of the decision to use it. But even with all that power, even with all that readiness, the true legacy of the B-52 wouldn't be defined by what it carried. It would be defined by what it prevented. In the end, the B-52 Stratofortress never needed to end the world, because its greatest success was making sure it never had to. For decades, it remained in the sky, on alert, on standby, a constant presence in a conflict defined not by battles fought, but by battles avoided. It carried a level of power that could not be ignored. But more importantly, it carried certainty. Certainty that the United States could respond. That distance offered no protection. That any attack would be met with force that could not be stopped. And in the Cold War, that certainty shaped everything. Because deterrence is not built on capability alone. It is built on belief. The belief that a response will come. The belief that the system will work. The belief that no advantage can eliminate the consequences. The B-52 became a central part of that belief, not hidden beneath the ocean, not buried underground, but visible, airborne, a symbol of reach and endurance, a reminder that power could be projected across the globe at any time. At the same time, it revealed something essential about the nature of strategic control. That flexibility matters, because unlike missiles, which once launched cannot be recalled, bombers could be redirected, delayed, called back. That ability introduced a layer of control that was critical in moments of uncertainty. It allowed decisions to evolve. It created space for reconsideration. And in a world where minutes could determine outcomes, that flexibility mattered. The B-52 also demonstrated the importance of endurance, not just in flight, but in strategy, because it remained relevant, adapted, modernized, decade after decade. Long after many other systems had been replaced, it continued to serve, to evolve, to carry new technologies while maintaining its original purpose. That longevity reflected more than engineering. It reflected design built around a concept that didn't change. Presence, reliability, control for the United States. It represented a commitment, not just to strength, but to stability, to maintaining a system that could prevent escalation, that could support decisions made under pressure, that could ensure that even in the most uncertain moments, there was always a response. And for the Soviet Union, it represented a constant factor, something that had to be considered, accounted for, planned against, because it was always there, and it wasn't going away. Today, the B-52 still flies, a reminder of a time when the world stood on the edge and stepped back, a reminder that power, when managed correctly, can prevent the very conflict it was built to fight. Because in the Cold War, the most important victories were not measured in territory or in battles won. They were measured in moments where escalation was avoided, where decisions were controlled, where the world moved forward instead of ending. And the B-52 Stratofortress played its role in that outcome. For more stories like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Because some of the most powerful forces in history aren't the ones that act. They're the ones that ensure action is never taken.